Around 2,600 years ago, in the heart of Jerusalem, stood one of the most sacred structures the ancient world had ever known, the Temple of Solomon. Its limestone walls gleamed under the Judean sun, and inside rested the most treasured objects of Israel's faith. The Ark of the Covenant, golden menorahs, altars adorned with precious metals, and centuries of offerings. It was the year 586 BC. On the eastern horizon, a powerful army advanced. Its standards bore the emblem of the Babylonian dragon. Its king, Nebuchadnezzar II, had decided that Jerusalem would pay for its rebellion with a price no one would forget for centuries. What nobody tells you is this: the objects carried away from the temple that day ended up in a foreign god's sanctuary. And one of them, the most sacred of all, simply vanished from history. No empire, no archaeologist, no expedition has ever found it. Today, we follow the evidence. If this kind of content is useful to you, subscribe. The button is right below the video. To understand the magnitude of what was lost, we need to first understand what the Temple of Solomon was and what it meant to the Hebrew people. King Solomon, son of the great King David, began construction of the temple around 966 BC on Mount Moriah in Jerusalem. According to the biblical account, in 1 Kings, Solomon convened 80,000 quarrymen, 70,000 carriers, and 3,300 supervisors. Imported cedar wood from Lebanon, supplied by King Hiram of Tyre, and hired the most skilled craftsmen in the known world. The temple measured approximately 27 meters long, 9 wide, and 13 high. Modest compared to other structures of the ancient world. But its value was not architectural, it was spiritual. Its interior was divided into 3 spaces: the ulam, or entrance vestibule, the hechal, or holy place, where golden lamps burned and sacred incense was offered, and the devir, the most holy place, where the Ark of the Covenant rested, covered by cherubim of olive wood overlaid with gold. The interior walls were lined with carved cedar, flowers, palm trees, cherubim, all covered in pure gold. The floor was cypress wood, also plated in gold. Before the temple stood 2 bronze columns called Jachin and Boaz, symbols of divine power and permanence. But what made the temple truly invaluable was not its materials. It was what had accumulated inside its walls over centuries. Jars of gold and silver, 7 branched menorahs forged from pure gold, the great table for the bread of the presence, the gold altar for incense, ritual vessels of incalculable worth, and, above all, the Ark of the Covenant, the holiest object in Judaism, which according to tradition contained the stone tablets of the law given to Moses on Sinai. For the Israelites, the temple was not simply a building. It was the earthly dwelling of God, the contact point between heaven and earth. All this splendor, all this legacy, accumulated over nearly 4 centuries, was about to face the fury of the most powerful king of his time. Nebuchadnezzar II ruled the Neo-Babylonian Empire from 605 to 562 BC. His name in Akkadian means Nabu, protect my heir, and his military achievements made him one of the most formidable monarchs of antiquity. He built the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, considered one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. He transformed Babylon into the largest and most powerful city of his era, with walls so wide that 2 war chariots could pass side by side on top of them. And he decided that the small kingdom of Judah had to be subdued once and for all. Fíjate en este detalle. Nebuchadnezzar's relationship with Jerusalem did not begin with the destruction of 586. Years earlier, in 605 BC, after defeating the Egyptians at the Battle of Carchemish, the Babylonian king imposed his dominion over all of Canaan, including the kingdom of Judah. King Jehoiakim of Judah submitted and delivered nobles and treasures as tribute. In that first incursion, Nebuchadnezzar took the first exiles to Babylon. Among them, according to the book of Daniel, the prophet Daniel himself and his companions. He also took some of the sacred vessels of the temple, depositing them in the temple of his god Marduk in Babylon. In 597 BC, King Jehoiachin of Judah attempted to rebel against Babylonian dominion, perhaps trusting in Egyptian support. Nebuchadnezzar responded with a lightning military campaign. Jerusalem fell, and this time, the king took Jehoiachin himself, chained to Babylon, along with 10,000 people, nobles, warriors, craftsmen, and priests. And with them, more temple treasures. Nebuchadnezzar placed on the throne Zedekiah, an uncle of Jehoiachin, as a puppet king. But Zedekiah would make the same mistake, and that mistake would bring irreversible consequences. In 589 BC, King Zedekiah of Judah, encouraged by Egyptian promises and the counsel of those who opposed Babylon, made the fatal decision. He rebelled against Nebuchadnezzar and suspended tribute payments. The Babylonian king's reaction was immediate and devastating. In January of 588 BC, the army of Babylon laid siege to Jerusalem. Troops surrounded the city, cutting off all supply of food and water. One of the cruelest sieges recorded in ancient history had begun. During the siege, the prophet Jeremiah persistently warned Zedekiah that resistance was futile, that it was God's will for the people to surrender. His words were considered treason. They threw him into a cistern. They imprisoned him. But he kept prophesying. Babylon would win. The temple would fall. The people would go into exile. The Book of Lamentations, attributed to Jeremiah, describes with heartbreaking realism what Jerusalem lived through during those months. Mothers unable to feed their children, elderly men fallen in the streets, priests dead before the altar. The famine inside the walls reached terrible proportions. After 18 months of siege, in the summer of 586 BC, the walls of Jerusalem gave way. The Babylonian army breached them and entered the city. King Zedekiah tried to flee eastward toward the Jordan Valley. He was captured in the plains of Jericho. His fate was brutal. Nebuchadnezzar ordered his sons executed before his eyes. Then they gouged out Zedekiah's eyes. So that would be the last image he carried forever. Chained in bronze shackles, he was taken to Babylon, where he died in prison. Jerusalem had fallen, but the worst was still to come. The man charged with executing the sacking and destruction of Jerusalem was Nebuzaradan, commander of Nebuchadnezzar's personal guard. He arrived in Jerusalem approximately 1 month after the walls fell, in August of 586 BC, according to 2 Kings chapter 25. Nebuzaradan proceeded methodically and mercilessly. First, he burned the Temple of Solomon. Then he burned the royal palace. Then he set fire to all the houses of Jerusalem. And finally, he ordered the entire Babylonian army to demolish the city walls. The Bible offers a detailed inventory of everything they took. The bronze columns Jachin and Boaz that flanked the temple entrance were toppled and broken apart for transport. The Great Bronze Sea, an enormous circular vessel resting on 12 bronze bulls, was smashed, and its pieces carried to Babylon. The pots, the shovels, the snuffers, the spoons. All the bronze utensils used in worship were looted. The fire pans, the basins, the sprinkling bowls, the lampstands, the tables, the libation cups. What was gold was taken as gold. What was silver was taken as silver. And here is the problem that has fascinated historians, archaeologists, and treasure hunters for over 2.5 millennia. The greatest mystery left by the destruction of the temple is the fate of the Ark of the Covenant. The Bible does not explicitly mention that the Babylonians took it. Some scholars believe it was hidden before the siege by foresighted priests. Others suggest it was destroyed in the fire of the temple. The second book of Maccabees indicates that the prophet Jeremiah hid it in a cave on Mount Nebo. What is certain is that the Ark of the Covenant disappears from history at this point. It was never again mentioned as a physical object. Its fate remains one of the greatest archaeological and historical enigmas of humanity. 400 years of faith concentrated in stone, wood, gold, and bronze were reduced to ruins and ashes in a matter of days. The temple Solomon took 7 years to build had ceased to exist. The destruction of the temple was not just a material disaster. It was a spiritual and theological catastrophe of immeasurable proportions for the people of Israel. The temple was the center of their religious life, the place where priests offered daily sacrifices, where pilgrims came at the great festivals, where God Himself dwelt among His people. Now that place was a heap of smoking rubble, and the people, what remained of them, were being led in chains along the road crossing the desert toward Babylon. This period, known as the Babylonian exile, would last almost 70 years. In exile, the Israelites faced a terrifying question. Had God abandoned them, or had they abandoned Him? The prophets of the period, especially Ezekiel and Isaiah, responded with a profound interpretation. The destruction had been a consequence of the people's unfaithfulness, their idolatry, their social injustice. It was not that God had been defeated. It was that God Himself had permitted the punishment as a means of purification. It was in exile that Judaism transformed radically. Without a temple, without sacrifices, without land. The people began to gather in assemblies to read and study the Scriptures. The synagogue was born, the institution that would allow Judaism to survive for millennia without need of a physical place of worship. The sacred objects of the temple arrived in Babylon and were deposited in the temple of Marduk, the chief god of the Babylonians. They were, for Nebuchadnezzar, a symbol of his God's triumph over the God of Israel. But the story did not end there. In 539 BC, Cyrus the Great of Persia conquered Babylon, and one of his first acts was to order the return of all sacred objects that Nebuchadnezzar had taken from conquered peoples. According to the book of Ezra, Cyrus returned 5,400 objects of gold and silver belonging to the temple in Jerusalem. The exiles could come home. What Nebuchadnezzar had destroyed with fire, history would rebuild. The second temple would rise on the ruins of the first. The people who had been taken in chains would return to their land. We have traveled together from the glory of Solomon's temple to its ashes. We have met the powerful Nebuchadnezzar, the people who endured the siege, the priests who watched the holiest things of their existence burn. We have asked what became of the ark, of the golden lampstands, of the great bronze sea. But if there is one lesson that resonates across the centuries from these events of 586 BC, it is this: empires rise and fall. Buildings, however majestic, are vulnerable to fire and time, but ideas, faith, the identity of a people that finds in its memory and sacred texts the reason for its existence, those are indestructible. The Temple of Solomon was destroyed in 586 BC. The Second Temple was built between 520 and 516 BC, and later magnificently expanded by Herod the Great. That Second Temple would in turn be destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD, and yet Judaism survived. Islam, Christianity, and Judaism continued to venerate the Temple Mount as one of the holiest places on earth, the Western Wall, what remained standing after the Roman destruction, still stands today, and millions of people visit it every year to pray, not as a monument to defeat, but as testimony that faith can survive any catastrophe. As for Nebuchadnezzar himself, the Bible offers an unexpected ending. The book of Daniel recounts that the king, at the height of his pride, was humbled by a mental affliction that made him live like an animal for 7 years, until he recognized the sovereignty of the God of heaven over all the kingdoms of the earth. Whether history or parable, the message is clear. Human power, however great, has its limits. The flames that consumed Solomon's temple in that summer of 586 BC did not extinguish a faith. They carried it in the hearts of the exiles across the desert to Babylon and back. That light is still burning today, more than 2,600 years later. Thank you for joining us on this journey through one of the most dramatic pages of ancient history. See you in the next one.